Okay, now the presentation.
Hello, my name is Elisabeth Goodman. I'm running this presentation today from my home office in South Cambridgeshire in the UK. And it's a very wintry scene outside the window as the plants prepare for the winter to hibernate and store up all of their energy in readiness for the spring. I'd like to talk to you today about coaching for mindful leadership. It's based on the many years that I spent in the pharmaceutical industry as a manager and as a leader, and on the work that I've been doing since to coach people who are leaders and managers. And what's become clear to me is that in our work and in our life, what matters is being able to connect to what is important, possible, and sustainable for each of us. So that is the theme, the underlining theme of this presentation. Coaching you today on how you could connect yourself and your teams to what is important, possible, and sustainable for each of you. I'd like to begin with this quote from Charles Tartt's book, Living the Mindful Life, which I read to help me develop my own mindfulness. And there's a quote in here about mindfulness, and in its magical simplicity come a presence and a peace which are sane and grounded, clear, joyful and awake, and full of compassion and wisdom. What I'd like to invite you to do is to think about what brings you presence and peace. For me, it's walking on nature when I'm able to quieten all the chatter that goes on in my head and really tune into all of my senses, what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what I'm feeling, what I'm touching. And really that is what gives me presence and peace and a joyfulness and an awakening, and all those lovely words in that quote, saneness and groundedness. And I bring that into my work as a coach when I'm working with my clients, that presence and that peace, and I connect to them and I connect to what they are experiencing, what they're thinking, what they're feeling. And then that releases my compassion and also their compassion for themselves and their inner wisdom, and hopefully some of mine. So this illustration is from the cover of my book, Wellbeing Musings, which is a collection of poetry and prose inspired by my time in nature. So yes, what brings you presence and peace? And how do you tap into and use your compassion and your wisdom in your work as leaders, for yourselves and with your teams? And I have on this slide the 4 practices that we're going to work through as we go through this presentation to connect you to that magical simplicity of mindfulness. And they're influenced by the self-development that I've done and that I've written about in Coaching in the Helix, and how that supports my work as a coach. How does your self-development support your work as a leader? So we're going to focus on 4 things: finding and connecting to meaning, to what matters; practicing yourself and social awareness; stewarding, supporting, developing your own and others' use of strengths and skills; and what you can do to cultivate your well-being when faced with the inevitable change and uncertainty that we experience in our work and in our lives. So beginning with the first one, connecting yourself and your team to what is important, possible, and sustainable for each of you. but important, starting with important. What gives you meaning? What gives you that feeling in your heart that, yes, this is what I'm here to do. This is what matters. And I've had that a couple of times in my working life, at least, if not more. Once was when I was facilitating a face-to-face meeting for a team. We had lots of things up on the walls, and they were walking around individually, reflecting and having conversations with each other. And there was an energy and an enthusiasm in the room. And I thought, yes, this is what I'm here to do, to facilitate people's thinking so that they can tap into what's important for them and what's possible and what's sustainable. And the other time was when I was writing one of my essays for my coaching qualification, and I interviewed maybe about 10 people about what matters to them at work and how could coaching help them. And it all came down to choice. It came down to their ability to choose what they did and how they showed up in their work. And again, realizing that for me was that moment of, yeah, this is what I'm here to do, to help people choose what they want to do in their work, how they want to lead their life at work. Now, it's possible that you have not had one of those moments yet. So if you haven't, my next slide might help you. This is a table of values, about 50 values. I'm sure there are more out there, but it's like a menu for you to choose from. As you look at this table, which are the words that really jump out for you? Which are the words where you go, yes, that matters for me. I need to have that in my work. I have perhaps changed jobs or been unhappy in certain jobs because that particular thing was missing. So for me, for instance, it's that creativity of finding different ways to help people with their thinking and seeing that happen, that magic when it happens, and learning, as you already know from the book I've written, that learning, self-development, continuously learning new things for myself and that I can bring into my work. So look at this table and see which jump out for you. Maybe you can't find them in the time that we have now. You might want to take a picture of the table and come back to it later. And I've done this kind of exercise with a team where people have found their values individually and talked about them to each other and then agreed which of those they really want to have in their team going forward. And it's given them language that they can then talk to their colleagues about what matters in their work and what they could do differently or more of or start doing to really bring those values into their work. What would you like to do with this knowledge? So the second capability is about practicing self and social awareness. And for me, this is about emotional intelligence or emotional capability, as I call it. And often we think that emotions are something that just get in the way, that we need to somehow shut them off and just focus on rational, logical thinking. But think about the last time you made a decision. Was it a purely rational exercise, or was there also something about how you felt about it, your gut feeling? And think about when, as a leader, you want to influence other people. Is it just facts, or is there emotion that makes it more powerful somehow? And this is what Leonard Mlodinow argues in his book, Emotional, that emotions actually help us to make the most of our mental resources. But yes, we need to regulate them. But before we talk more about that, what emotion are you picking up in this virtual room during this presentation? What emotion are you picking up from other people? And how is that different or the same to what you're feeling? And what helps you to know? For me, it's facial expression, body language, how people are holding themselves, what words they're using. If they're posting questions in the chat, what's the tone of those conversations? Obviously, it's much easier if you're in a face-to-face situation. But what else could you do to be more aware of your own emotions and of those of others? I use journaling. I use journaling as a way to be able to tune into what I'm thinking. There's also an app that I have on my phone that prompts me morning and evening to just tune into, what are you feeling now? It's called How We Feel, developed by Mark Brackett. So what else could you do to be more aware? And how could you use this knowledge? How could this knowledge be helpful? So again, I have a second slide about working with emotional capability. This comes from my book, Coaching in the Helix. And it's a model that I developed when I was receiving coaching from a colleague. We coach each other. We call that peer coaching. And I was reflecting on how this related to my interactions with members of my family. But of course, it could work just as well with members of your team. And there are 4 aspects that I realized were important. One was that self-awareness, which we've already been talking about. As I thought about each person in my family, how aware was I about how I was feeling? Whereabouts on this scale would I put that? And how well did I understand the causes for that feeling? How well had I analyzed that? And in some cases, I was suppressing that. I wasn't doing it. In others, I had a very good understanding. So I played around with that interpretation of my emotional capability with each member of my family. And then once we understand what we're feeling and why we're feeling that, we have a choice. We can ignore it, we can let it go, or we can choose to do something about it. And that felt so liberating to actually go, okay, I feel this not so good emotional reaction to one member of my family. I kind of understand what they're going through, and then that's why we perhaps are not as well connected as I'd like us to be. I'm going to just let that sit for a bit and maybe show them a bit more compassion. And just making that choice felt so much better. And in that particular situation, I thought, I'm not going to tell them how I feel, or rather, I'm going to show them more compassion, and that's what I'm going to express. And again, coming to that realization, doing that processing, felt a lot better for me. How might you use a model like this? And what kind of conversations would you like to start in your team about how you and others are feeling? So the third capability that I want to talk about, the third practical approach that I want to talk about, is what we can do to steward, support, develop our own and others' strengths. And I'd like to start by sharing this analogy with what happens in nature. You've got this beautiful picture here of all the different plants. They're all different and they're all thriving. They're all receiving exactly what they need in the way of nutrients and light, sunshine, warmth, temperature, water. And that's what enables them to thrive, the fact that each one is receiving exactly what they need. So how is that for us? We are neurodiverse. We are all wired differently. We all think differently. We all have different strengths. We all have different skills. Do we know what those are? Do we know what our strengths and skills are and what those of our individual team members? How do we know? What conversations have we had? And are we using and developing and supporting those strengths and skills as well as we could? So again, I have a second slide to help us with this reflection. It comes from my book, Coaching in the Helix, and it's a selection of capabilities that might vary with neurodiversity. And you might find that you have special strengths with some of these, but you might also have challenges with some of them. And in a way, it's a bit like light and shade. You can't have light without shade. You can't have special strengths without some flaws. And it's about what we can do to develop and support our different strengths, whilst also addressing some of those challenges so that they don't get in the way of us being able to thrive. So again, you probably won't have time to complete your thinking around which of these are strengths and challenges for you and each of your team members, but you might want to take a screenshot to reflect on later. So the fourth capability is about well-being. It's about well-being when things change and when things are uncertain. And at the very beginning, I invited you to think about what gives you presence and peace. And that becomes even more important, I think, when we are going through change and uncertainty. This illustration comes from another one of my books, The Effective Teams Change Management Workbook. And in it, I depict 3 different types of behaviors or reactions that we might have towards change and uncertainty. And we might experience any one of these, more than one of these at any time. And it's absolutely fine that we do. But what I'm suggesting is that, again, we tune into and understand which of these behaviors we are experiencing or demonstrating. And the first one, that of being a victim, apparently is one that we sit in about 15 to 20% of the time. And it's when we're using the language they are doing this stuff to us. And why is this happening to me? And we're in that victim mindset where we feel we don't have any power, we don't have any influence, and change is just happening, and it feels dreadful. We might be in survivor mode, and apparently we do that 60 to 70% of the time. And this is where we just kind of put our head down and try and ignore what's happening and just get on with our work. And hopefully the change will just go away and we'll be able to continue as normal. So we're kind of coping, but that can bring a lot of stress. And again, it's not one that we want to sit in forever because of that stress that comes from just somehow just putting up with what's happening and hoping it go away. So the third mindset, and the one that we aspire to be in, is that of navigator. And again, we're in there about 15 to 20% of the time. And it's where we feel we've got some kind of control over what's going on. So we're looking for ways to be involved. We're looking for information that can help to reduce that uncertainty. And we're looking for ways in which we can take action. In my work as a coach, that's what I'm helping people to get to, that point again where they have that choice, where I've helped them to free up their thinking so that they can find a way forward that they have some kind of control over. So which of these behaviours do you recognise in yourself and in members of the team? And what could you do to look after your well-being so that you're better able to get to that navigator state, and to help members of your team look after their well-being so that they can do that too? My final slide is really a summary slide. So it's a reminder that we've been exploring what brings us peace and presence, how can we create that mindful state within ourselves that gives us presence and peace, keeps us sane and grounded, gives us that joy, sense of being awake, and enables us to feel our own compassion and wisdom and help that happen in the teams that we interact with, help our team members to tune into their self-compassion and kindness and their wisdom, even when there is change and uncertainty. And I invited you to tap into what you are here to do, what you really feel in your heart that gives you meaning, feels important. And then we explored self-awareness and social awareness, how you can tune into your own emotions and those of the people that you're working with, so that you can make good decisions and communicate your vision and make things happen in a way that is possible and sustainable for each of you. And then finally, we looked at what happens in nature, the biodiversity of nature, and how plants are able to thrive when they have the conditions that they need to use their strengths and their skills. And I invited you to consider how that might be for you and for each member of your team. So yes, what are you already doing in relation to each of these things? What else could you do? And what will you do? So I'd like to thank you for your attention today. You have all my contact details here. I'd love to hear from you by email. Please connect to me on LinkedIn or take a look at my website. And now we have some time for questions and answers, and I look forward to having that discussion with you. Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful sharing about the mindful leadership. As you know, the webinar was live streamed on different social platforms. So we have many people watching online. There are more than thousands of people watching. And we collected some questions from the audience, and I will put them in the chat, and we will go into the Q&A. And some of them are in English and some in Chinese. In the Chinese, we have translated them into English, so it will be easier for you to answer.
Thank you.
Okay, the first one. 好，那刚刚我们非常感谢我们 Elisabeth 女士的分享。那现在我们进入问答环节。那大家有什么问题的话，现在可以尽管提问。那我们 Zoom 里的朋友可以直接开麦提问，也可以把问题发在聊天框里。那我们其他各个平台的朋友们可以把我们的问题也直接提出来，然后我们的工作人员也会反馈给我们的嘉宾，然后我们可以进行实时的互动交流。那我们这里呢有第一个问题，然后请我们的 Elisabeth 女士来解答一下。Okay, I'll read them in both Chinese and English. So, yeah. 那第一个问题是在这4个实践方法中，就我们刚才在我们的演讲过程当中 ，Elisabeth 她提了4个就是实践的方式，领导力实践方式。那分别是第一个，我们是寻找这个意义感；第二个是如何利用自己的情绪价值；那第3个是领导者如何去利用自己以及团队成员的优势和技能。那最后一个就是如何提升自己的幸福感。那第一个问题是在这4个实践方法中，您认为哪一个对个人和团队的发展最为重要 ？Okay, the first question of the 4 practices, which do you think is the most important for personal and team development?
It's a great question. Before I answer it, I just wanted to check whether you wanted to record the answers or whether you're happy not to.
Yeah, it will be recorded.
It is being recorded.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to cheat and go, actually, there are two practices which I think are the most important, because I don't think you can have one without the other. So I think you need to find a way to look after your well-being so that you have the peace of mind to be able to reflect on what's going on with yourself, so your self-awareness, and what's going on with other people. So I feel you need the two there, the well-being practices and the self-awareness and the social awareness together.
那这几个原则其实是应该说是缺一不可的，因为我们缺了一个呢，总觉得可能就没有办法达到那么好的效果。那在我这里呢，主要再提一下其中的2个实践方法，一个是我们在我们的工作日常生活中都要能够去寻找一种方式去提升自己的幸福感，然后在这个过程当中去能够更好的帮助我们去反思。那同时也能够更好的去提升我们的自我意识，然后通过自己的情绪，然后能够更增强，就认识到自己可能当下面临的处境。啊，同时这种方法也能让我们去更好的理解我们身边的我们团队的成员、同事他们所处的一个状况。Okay, the second question. Click one. She has several questions. And in the chat box, and we come to the second. 那第2个问题是我们一位这姓黄的朋友，他说这些原则通过哪些具体的方法进入对应的工作场景，是否可以就举一些例子？ The second question, what are the specific ways in which these principles are applied to the corresponding work scenarios? Can you give some examples?
Yes, sure. If it's easy for you, I see to show the slide that's got the 4 principles or practices, then that might help.
Yeah, I'll share the screen, okay? Yes, the PowerPoint slide.
Whilst you're putting it up, I'll just start with the first one.
The first.
So it's the next slide, yeah, which has got the 4. Oh, and at the one before.
This one.
That's the one. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Thank you. Finding and connecting to meaning. So I think I mentioned that in the presentation. So one way that you could do it in a work environment is to invite each person in turn in the team to identify the things that are most important to them to have in their work. I have a number of tools at my disposal as a coach. So I have those 50 or so values on cards. So in a face-to-face session, you can invite people to pick out the individual cards that are the most important to them, represent the values that are the most important to them, and then ask them to explain why each of those are important. And by taking the time to think about it and listen to each other's replies, it can then become possible to identify those that, as a team, are most important to you. Shall I pause there and then talk through the other 3?
Yes. 那关于这4个实践，我们具体的 运用。那首先第一个就是如何去寻找意义。那这个我们刚刚就是我翻到下一页啊，就是在这一页，比如说我们有这50个价值的品质，然后这个也是 Elisabeth 他们有设计出来的一张表，他们会在就是面对比如说领导者团队的时候，会邀请团队里的每一个人去轮流去思考，就是对你而言，什么在工作中什么是至关重要的。那我们可以用这张表，就是这个工具，然后去跟对方进行面对面的交流，然后让对方去选出从中选出这样的一张卡片，我们可以把它制作成一个卡片的形式，让对方去选择哪个卡片对你而言是最重要的。然后呢，让对方去解释为什么是这张卡片这个品质对你而言是你认为是最重要的。那我们在这个过程当中，然后去聆听对方的回答，然后从而呢，在这个过程当中很有可能去发现到对这个人以及对我们团队就是哪些的品质价值是至关重要的。Okay, thank you. Please continue.
Okay, so the second practice or principle, if we go back to that slide, thank you, was self-awareness and social awareness. So a lot of that needs to be done more in a private setting. People that I coach some of them, when they realize that they want to do more of this than they are doing at the moment, will schedule time in their calendars to be able to pause and reflect on what's going on. We can be very, very busy at work and rushing from one task to the next. And in some organizations, there's an expectation that we more or less work non-stop. However, if we're able to take time to reflect, just going for a walk at lunchtime or walking to work or walking home, that can give us an opportunity to stop and reflect on how we're feeling, what we're feeling. And when we go back to work, it's proven that we are so much more productive if we've taken those opportunities to pause and reflect. The other thing that some managers and leaders do is they will deliberately, in their one-to-one meetings with their staff or in team meetings, actually ask how people are feeling and share how they are feeling as well, to role model that it's possible to have that kind of conversation. So those are some other ways in which you could do that. That's number 2.
Thank you. 那关于第二个，我们如何去修炼自我意识和社会意识？那像 Elisabeth 她提了2个例子。首先，对于我们个人而言，我们要去增强自己的意识。那首先一定要有时间能够让自己短暂的停下来，有时间去思考，跟自己相处。因为我们平时工作中都特别的繁忙，然后大家很少可能有这样的时间。那我们可以利用，比如说午餐的时间，或者是我们上下班路上的时间，然后去给自己一段时间独处一下，去关注一下自己当下的此时此刻的感受。你一定要去花时间跟自己独处，去思考一下，这样你才会发现，特别是你回到工作中的时候，你会发现自己的可能工作效率也提升了。那第二个是我们作为领导者可以就是特意的去安排跟我们的团队成员、我们的员工进行1对1的对话，可以问对方，就是你这个时候当下你的感受如何，然后你的就是面临的问题是怎样的，你有什么感受想法，然后我们领导者呢再分享自己的这个感受想法。那这样呢也是可以给员工一个激励，还有以及一个示范的作用，然后这样也能够去帮对方能够更好的去提升自己的意识。Okay, the third one, please.
Yes, and so the third one, I have a couple of reflections on that. One is that there are a lot of personality tools available. So the ones I have used with teams and individuals are the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI. I know that there's a Chinese version of that available. And I've also used Belbin team roles. And there are lots of other tools like these which enable individuals to get a better sense of what their strengths are and their challenges, and open up the communication within the team of all the different strengths within the team, and how those can be used and how people can support each other. And the strongest teams are the ones where there is that big diversity of strengths. So it's a very useful reflection to do.
那第三个，我们在工作中去管理自己和他人对优势和技能的运用，我们可以通过各种工具来实现。那比如说我们现在非常流行的 MBTI，然后还有像Belbin BLBIN，这个是针对团队的一个工具。我们可以通过这些工具，然后帮助，然后在我们团队内部，可能比如说大家进行一个沟通，大家面临了哪些挑战，然后我们比如说如何去运用各自的优势和技能，然后大家如何去相互给予支持。那我们最高效的团队，就自然是那些能够对多元化，并且同时能够最大化的去发挥各个成员优势和技能的团队。Thank you. The fourth.
Yes, I suppose there are two things there. One is I've already talked a bit about how taking that time to pause and reflect is a bit of an individual practice. Although I know that many organizations have put a greater emphasis on well-being at work, and will have well-being champions networks to support and encourage that. And the other one is about dealing with change and uncertainty. And I think there it's about a leader and a manager being aware of how much change and uncertainty is going on for them and their team, and giving people the opportunity to get involved in some way to obtain information about what's going on, because involvement, having some sense of control and having some understanding of what's going on is what helps us to deal with change and to navigate change.
那第四个是如何提升我们的幸福感，应对变化和不确定性。那刚才我提到的就是我们要花时间能够停下来去反思。那这个是针对个人的。那目前针对组织的话，我知道有很多组织可能特别注重员工的这个心理这个幸福感问题。那他也会特定的在组织内部形成一个交际网络，然后给大家提供一个空间，去帮助大家交流沟通，去提升这样的一个幸福感。那在面对这个变化和不确定性的时候，我们作为就是领导者、管理者，一定要能够意识到，就是在当下你们就面临的这个变化和不确定性是一个怎样的程度，究竟有多少变化和多少不确定性。那同时，领导者自己一定要深入的参与到其中，因为这样的话，你才能够就是更好的去了解这个事情的一个真实的情况，到底发生了什么，到底在经历什么，然后从而要掌握，能够就是像刚才我们说的这个三个状态一样，就是受害者、幸存者、主导者。那一定要去掌握这个主导者的一个优势，就是让自己去从一个主导者的角度，然后去识别到我们团队可能面临的各种问题。Thank you for your answer. And let's see. This question is from Kate Huang. Yeah, and he has another question, the third one. How do you assess the value of this content to your audience performance? 您如何评估就是这些内容对受众工作绩效的价值？
We probably don't need to look at the slides for this question. And I want to check that I properly understood it. So by the content, I'm assuming you mean these ideas that we've been discussing, and by the audience, I'm wondering whether that means the leaders and their teams, the leaders and managers and their teams. I see he's nodding. So yeah, is that your understanding as well?
哎，这位朋友，你方便你说你取消静音开麦讲话吗？或者说可以在聊天框里发一下这些，你的问题是说我们今天分享的这些内容，然后对我们可能，比如我们现在在听的这些人，你可能是一位管理者，
不是对我们听的人，是我们如果要去实际操作的话，对这个方法用下去的受众，不是中间人，不是我们听的人，是实际
使用者，
受众，对，
就实践者。
对。
Yes, I will rephrase the question. How do you assess the value of these ideas to those who will use these ideas in practice?
Wow, that there are lots of possibilities here. So I think, first of all, the individual who is putting any of this into practice will know. They will know what's different as a result. So they will know how they're feeling, and they will see what results they get from adopting these practices. All of the ones that I've shared are based on my own experiences and the people that I coach. So there's someone I've been coaching recently. Obviously, I'm talking in general terms to protect confidentiality, but they will measure how well they are doing by what they see in terms of their productivity and their well-being. So yes, so I think an individual will know whether these things are delivering value or not for themselves. And of course, if you're doing this with your team, then you will again see what difference it makes to your team's performance. And if you have metrics at work, then hopefully you will see a difference in the metrics. One of the organizations that I work with as a coach, they collect feedback from the people that get coached, and they have observed marked increases in terms of productivity, people getting promoted in their work, people choosing to stay in their job. And finally, as a leader, you could actively collect feedback from your team members on what differences they experience as a result of these things.
Thank you. 那我们如何就是在实际运用中去衡量这些这些方法的它的一个效果？那首先就是这个结果可能是有很多种的。就我们其实个人的话，你可能在应用实践的时候，你可能会比如说通过你做这项这样这个实践的成果，去能够感受到它可能带来了怎么样不一样的结果。 那我的这些方法是基于我多年的一个就是管理以及教练的经验。那其实在我就是共事的很多就是个人和团队，比如说团队一个组织，他们的一个衡量的这个效果的方式是，他们向就是一些团队成员，就是接受教练指导的团队成员去收集他们的一个反馈，就是他们在工作当中有没有发现自己的这个工作效率是否提升，或者说有没有得到升职加薪，或者说他有没有就继续留在这家公司工作，然后可以通过这一系列的一个具体的一个标准来衡量这个效果。那我们作为管理者，我们也可以去收集我们团队成员的反馈，那可以用一些指标，这些指标也可以是我们自己设定的，然后通过这些指标，然后去衡量它，就是我们用这套方法在我们实践中取得的成果。Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for your answers. And now let's see. Considering the time, I think we might have another question. Wait a moment, please.大家还有其他的问题的吗？我们现在还可以，大家还可以继续提问。Yes, here is a question I'll put into the chat. Can you say an example of your use of emotional capability model when working with leaders and teams? 那这个问题呢，是说，就是 Elizabeth 她在跟团队和领导者一起共事的时候，她就是如何运用了这个情绪能力模型。那么我刚才在提到情绪能力模型的时候，Elizabeth 她也提到了可能在面对家人的时候是关于这个模型的使用方法。那在面对我们工作中领导者和团队的方法又是怎样的？ Yes.
So I love how challenging these questions are. You're really making me think, which is great. Again, I see if you put up the slide with the model, the emotional capability model, that might help as well.
Yeah.
So, as you can imagine, it's very different working with an individual, like a leader, and working with a whole team. I'll just wait for Icy to pull the slide up.
Yeah, this slide.
Yeah, that's the one. Thank you. If you're working with an individual, then yeah, it's possible to have a one-to-one conversation, and that is, yeah, it's so much more possible to do that reflection on an individual basis. So when I'm working with an individual, that's in a coaching setting, and they could be at any point in terms of their awareness of how they're feeling. If they're very aware, they'll just come out and say it. If they're not aware, then what I'm doing is I'm listening to the language that they're using and the body language, and I will reflect back what I'm seeing or hearing and ask them what that is in terms of what they're feeling. Again, if I'm working with them individually, if they haven't expressed it themselves, then I might ask them, what do you think is causing that? So that would be the analysis step. And then for the choice, I would ask them, and what would you like to do about that? And then the expression would then be either they've expressed it directly during the coaching session to me, or they have identified how they would like to express it to someone else. I'll pause there, Icy, and then I'll talk about the team.
那关于这个情绪能力模型，我们在首先讲一个面对个人的时候是如何运用这个模型的。因为如果是对方他的这个，因为我们就是每个人情绪可能处于一个点，有的人他这个情绪点可能是非常的明显的，就是非常的外放，然后大家能够一眼就识别出来的。那有的人他的这个情绪可能就是不是那么能够让你明显的去意识到，他可能自己也是不能够很就是明确的去意识到。那这个时候就是我们在做教练的时候，跟对方对话过程中，就是要能够深度的去聆听，并且去听对方他的一个语言，他的一个声音，他的一个就是语音语调。那同时也要观察他的这个身体语言，然后再向对方去可能去一些反馈你看到的一些什么内容，你的感受到的对方的一个他的感受，他的想法。那然后呢，我们是首先就是让他一个能够提升一个自我意识，然后呢是在我们再去分析，你可以去问对方，就是到底是你觉得是什么，就是可能导致你可能拥有这样的一个情绪，然后我们再来进行分析。分析的时候，我们再进行，然后就是一个选择了。选择就是问对方，就是你觉得你能够去做什么，来应对，来处理这样的情绪。那最后呢，就是一个呈现了，就是通过然后把他自己的选择，然后呢去呈现，就是在行动中表现出来。Please continue.
Just before I talk about how this works with the team, the other thing I would do with an individual is I would invite them between coaching sessions to reflect on what might be triggering them to have different emotions. So often there's some kind of pattern going on. So if someone starts really paying attention to different situations that might provoke different feelings, that can provide useful data for them to reflect upon, or for us to reflect upon in a coaching session.
再补充一点，那我们在个人运用这个情绪能力模型的时候呢，是在我们在做教练的时候，因为可以在就是一次，就是这一次跟下一次2次指导之间的时候，邀请对方在这些期间，然后去能够去感受、去思考是什么，然后导致了他产生了不同的情绪，让他能够意识到，自己在不同的情况下分别有什么样的感受，有什么样的情绪。那这样的话，可能在下一次就是知道自己在遇到什么样的情况、什么样的情绪的时候，能够更有意识到这样自己的一个可能面临的问题，然后自己的一个应对的状态和方式。
So as I was talking about the way I might work with an individual, with the leader, for instance, I mentioned that sometimes they might already be very self-aware, sometimes they might not. And this can reflect something that's known as a spectrum of independent thinking. So a leader may be able to do all of this reflection that I've described on their own with very little prompting from me, or they might benefit from more prompting. And the same is true with a team. A team will be at different stages of maturity, and that will reflect how much I would need to intervene and how much they would do their own thinking. So again, I'll pause before I talk some more about that.
那在面对领导者团队的时候，然后像有的领导者他的自我意识就比较的强，可能就 从我的角度就不需要有太多的干预，对方可以进行一个独立的思考。那有的人他的这个自我意识就不那么的强，所以特别关于团队，他可能处于就是一个不同的成熟期。那就是我的话会去思考，可能就包括领导者要思考，就是从自己，就是我们的干预要在就是多大程度上进行干预，那多大程度上可以让对方进行一个独立的思考。
So with teams, you may already be aware of a model, which is the Tuckman model, stages of team development, where teams typically go through different stages: the forming stage, when they're just getting together; the storming one, which is where a lot of conflict might happen; norming, when they've worked through that and are working well together; performing, when they're achieving really high performance. And then there's a final stage, which is where changes happen within the team, sometimes referred to as the mourning, MOURNING stage. And I feel that reflects very much the different levels of emotional capability that might be going on within a team. Again, I'll pause there. I see.
Yeah, thank you. Could you please put the name of the model in the chat?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to clarify with you, the first stage is forming, getting together. The second stage is the storming stage, where the conflict may arise. And what's the third stage?
Yes, the norming stage, again, I'm just typing them in for you.
就是在我们就是面对团队的时候，就是有一个模型，这个模型是一个团队发展的一个四阶段模型，叫做 TACMAN 四阶段模型。TACMAN 好几个阶段的模型。那这个模型就是它就是关于我们团队就是成长的一个过程，从最开始的团队形成，那大家团队成员刚聚集到一起，然后再到后来的可能一个成长期，一个成长期里面，大家可能很容易产生一个冲突，然后包括最后的一个可能一直到最后可能有一个就是大家突然能够实现一个蜕变的一个就是蜕变期这样子。那在这个不同的这个期间，不同的这个阶段呢，大家的情绪呢也是不一样的。那这样的一个不同阶段、不同情绪，也能够帮助我们去理解，然后不同的阶段，这个团队以及我们个人，大家可能面对什么样的情绪，然后我们如何去利用这样的情绪，然后能够就是更好的实现我们团队的一个成长。OK，
So
这个阶段呢是6阶段，如果大家就是需要知道这个6阶段的话，可以就是可以联系我们的工作人员，然后我们工作人员可以把这个一个阶段这个模型分享给大家。
So the way you could work with a team is typically if we're doing team coaching, there will be 2 of us involved, so that we're both able to observe what is going on. We would sit in on a team meeting, on a normal team meeting, and observe what's going on. And depending on what stage the team is at, forming, storming, norming, performing, or mourning, there will be different emotions going on. And so if and as appropriate, we would help the team to become aware through the emotional capability model, to become aware of what emotions are going on, what might be causing them, what they would like to do about that, and how they will express that. And there will be stronger emotions going on in the storming stage when the team is getting to understand different people's views, different people's feelings, and how to make sure that everybody is heard. And there will also be some stronger feelings going on when change happens to the team in that final stage that I've written. And it's not necessarily a linear process within a team. There might be going backwards and forwards between these different stages of development. There's lots more I could say about this, but I hope that's helpful for starters.
Thank you。那这个就是关于几个阶段的团队发展模型。那我在做团队教练的时候也经常使用，就是大家团队和大家一起开会的时候，我们会在旁边观察，然后这个在这个屋子里大家的情绪是怎么样的，因为也能注意到在不同的阶段大家的情绪是不一样的。那有2个阶段大家的情绪呢往往是比较激烈的，比如第2个阶段，那就是相当于一个暴风成长期。那这个期间我们可以看到大家有不同的观点、不同的感受，但是我们要确保每一个人的他的观点，他就是都能被听见，每个人都是被重视的。那还有一个是比较这种情绪比较强烈的，就是最后一个，可以说是一个蜕变期，就是一个真正实现就是变化的时候，这样一个最后的一个阶段。那这整个阶段呢，也并不是说完全可能就是一个直线进行的，它也可能是来来回回、反反复复的。那关于这个模型呢，就是暂时先讲这么多，当然还有更多的内容，大家可能可以继续了解这个模型。Okay, considering the time, we have another question from Craig. Well, maybe we have the last question. And the many questions here today. And the last question is about how to clarify the 50 core values. And can there be additional values?
Could I clarify the 50 values?
Yeah, how to clarify it, yeah. No, categorize, sorry, categorize.
Categorize.
Put them into what kind of categories?
Okay. Again, if you could show the relevant slide.
Yes.
I'd love to hear from the people on this call if they could categorize them. I have heard people talk about intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. And these values, in a way, are also motivators. What motivates you? And that two-way categorization might be quite a good one to go for. So, for instance, what are the things that you rely on external to yourself to make you feel good? And what are the things that actually come from, those are the extrinsic ones, and what are the ones that you can make happen on your own? So is wealth on here? I think wealth is on here. Wealth would definitely be an extrinsic one. So, and status. So the things that, yeah, wealth is on here. It's right in, so it's the fourth row down, in the middle column, 4th row down. There you go, wealth. So there, and fame. So wealth, fame, status. These are things, new experiences. These are things that you rely on other people, external factors to provide. And it is said that we become happiest when actually we don't need those external motivators, but we just draw on things from ourselves. I think some of these might fall between the two categories. So beauty is an external thing, but our assessment of beauty is very subjective. So I once did an exercise with some other people where we walked around and we looked for the ugliest things we could find. And in looking at something that's really ugly, you actually discover that it has beauty as well. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on the categorization. Was there a second part to that question? I can't remember.
Yeah, there can still be additional values, other values add to the
Yes.
table.
Yes, there will be additional ones, definitely. Yeah.
最后一个问题呢，是我们可以如何对这些就是核心的价值进行一个分类？那我们可以就是比如说一个方式，我们可以从就是一个人的内在和外在，我们可以从内在外在这两个方面来进行分类。像有一些比如可能像地位啊、财富啊，像这些有些核心价值它是属于比较内在的，像有些可能是比较外在的，比如像美。但是美这个问题呢，它有一点争议，因为美它往往是主观的，就像我们有时候看到一些可能觉得不那么好看、觉得丑的东西，但是慢慢的可以仔细也能发现它也有美的一面，所以这个也是相对而言比较主观的。当然这个表呢，就是这50章，这里面就是大概有50个左右的一个价值，这个呢是给大家一个参考。当然我们也可以就是添加你认为的比较重要的一些价值品质在里面。好，我们今天非常感谢大家的提问，如果大家还有其他的问题的话，可以就是可以跟我们反馈，我们也可以就是可以帮助大家，然后去进一步的与我们的 Elisabeth 我们的嘉宾进行沟通。Okay, thank you so much, Elisabeth. Thank you for being here with us, and thank you for answering your questions. And it's very inspiring. And we have a lot of feedback from the audience. Yes, it's very useful and it's very inspiring. And actually, yeah, I'd like to hear more. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure, and I've loved the very challenging questions. They've made me think as well. So yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. So that's all for today's webinar. And have a good day. Thank you. And after the webinar, I will email you about the feedback about how many people watched the webinar online.
That would be lovely.
So thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
那以上呢是关于我们今天就是我们演讲的一个介绍，是我们关于正面领导力的分享。那接下来呢，我在这里也跟大家预告一下，就是我们即将开启就是 Mentoring 蒙课，我们即将开启我们的国际职业导师认证课程。那这个课程是即将1月开课。那我们蒙课呢是欧洲导师教练协会受证的，是中国唯一受证的导师服务机构。我们的导师课程服务标准都是经过欧洲导师与教练协会认证的。那大家看到这个导师可能会有一点点的疑惑，这个导师呢，它有别于我们平时可能在学校在生活中遇到的导师。那我们的导师呢，它是有一系列标准的流程和体系的。那在我们的这个导师呢，在面对学员的时候，主要会能够帮助学员去达到以下的成果。首先，第一个是我们导师可以帮助学员，就是在比如说工作中乃至生活中，可以帮助学员去明确自己的一个发展方向。因为学员可能很多时候就是面对一个困惑，可能对于自己的目标，那导师呢就是可以帮助我们的学员去明确他的一个发展方向，同时 也在这个过程中，然后激励学员去挖掘他的无限潜能，能够快速的去实现一个目标。那第二个是我们的导师，他能够帮助我们学员提升他的一个能量，就不仅仅说你把事情去完成，同时在这个过程当中，你的整个的感觉状态都能得到一个很好的提升。那第三个是我们的导师，他既可以帮助学员去激活他的内在资源，也可以帮助他去发现并激活更多的外在资源。那第四个是我们的成果，是导师辅导的成果是可以被量化的，我们的那个 KPI、KDI、ROI 都可以被设定并衡量的。最后呢是我们的一个特色技能，是导师他可以去实现一个隐性知识的萃取，他不仅仅是说把自己的经验和智慧分享给学员，同时也能够去萃取他人的技能，然后传承给学员。那感兴趣的朋友可以扫下方的二维码，然后联系我们进一步了解。好，最后非常感谢大家聆听今天的讲座，我们也邀请大家留下自己的宝贵意见，大家可以扫这个下方的二维码，然后去填写一份这个反馈问卷。我们也希望得到大家的很多的宝贵意见，然后帮助我们能够更好的提升我们的整个活动讲座的质量。好，今天的讲座就到这里，非常感谢大家的观看，我们下次再见。